Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
Everybody, welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Today is Tuesday, October 20th. I cannot believe we are done with our first month of season 3 right here on the radio program. You know, you're in the right place for conversations that are about current needs that we as business leaders face today, specifically regarding technology, customer expectations, and quickly changing markets. Now, the people that we speak to, Steve today included, is all about sharing what we know, the experiences that we have, information that would be useful, because it's important that we are doing whatever it takes to reach our short-term goals, to increase confidence in our overall long-term positioning for our companies. This is program 180. Use financials to set directions for growth. Even when we aren't doing what we feel like we should be, we can always check in with our financials. We can always go back to that story of what did we actually do, instead of having to go, well, it felt like this, or, well, we think it did this. Actually knowing gives us that stake in the sand to move forward. Today, we're talking with Steve Merager, founder of Merager Financial Solutions, and he leads teams to produce high-quality financials and IT results. As a fractional CFO, Steve brings highly effective concepts and practices to rising companies to give them a unique and competitive advantage. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Hi, Jess. Thank you so much. Great to be here.
I'm so glad. Now, see, everybody who's listening, even though we're not in the same location, we are both in Boulder, Colorado today, where it's raining. It might even get some snow out there, and it's cold. And you've already been out today, haven't you, Steve?
Yes. I walked my son to his school bus this morning, so that was a wonderful start to the day.
That's awesome. Cool. It's very cool. I'm not looking forward to going outside, and I don't think I have to today. So the gig is up. This one has a cold over here on this side of the screen, and so I got a hug and got told, "Feel better, mommy." Feel better, mommy. But besides that, how can I not feel good being here today with you, Steve? Because when I first met you and heard the things that you shared, I was really excited. I was really excited because we all know we need financials, and we all know we even have them. We may even run the basic reports that every business needs, but we may not actually do anything with them. We may run them because we have reports. So I want to know, from your perspective and your experience, how did you get into this, where you were like, financials tell us the story?
Well, yeah, I've been involved in all levels of different types of organizations, from multi-billion-dollar companies to universities to startups and so many more. Now that I've started my business, and I've been in business for about 4 years, so many businesses, and I work a lot with small businesses. There is exactly what you said. There's this sensibility that, I print out all these numbers and all these reports, and I just see just this flurry of numbers, and they don't make any sense. They're just, my eyes sort of cross when I look at them. But the thing about that really is that if it's done right, it's the story of your business, and it should be telling you exactly, in the financial side, exactly what you as a business owner are saying to all the people out there that you're speaking with about what your business is. And so a lot of times, a bookkeeper is fantastically important, because they're the ones that sort of frame out the story. What I do is I go in and I really speak deeply with the CEO and really take that sort of framework that the bookkeeper has put together and adjust it so that it really is not only correct in the present moment, but also so that in the future it's telling the business owner what they can do to maximize profits, sleep better sometimes, so that they know what's going on. But it's the one thing about the books, our businesses, is we have limited resources. There's a finite amount of resources, and it's critical to put our arms around what those resources are, and then we can use them. There's not sort of a pie in the sky idea that we have just unlimited resources. So
Kind of like this puzzle of, sometimes we think we have more, we think we have different because we're just not looking at it. And sometimes it's easier to not know. The only downside with not knowing is that it shows up in other ways, doesn't it? It shows up in the fact that decisions are not being made timely. It shows up in that opportunities to either make more money or to increase savings also get missed. And so, isn't it? How, what's this image that's coming to mind is the boogeyman in the closet. is that what our financials, most people that you're talking with and working with, they're like, come on, I just don't even want to know they exist. We're just going to pretend they don't.
Yeah, I mean, you really nail it. There's a lot of there can be fear-based thinking, and it really stops us. So that fear is, I'm not successful, or I'm not going to be successful, or the product or service that I'm offering is not useful. And I think once we get over that as business owners, it allows us to have that joy of opening up, all of the boxes that we think some boogeyman, as you said, is going to pop out of, and look at it and go, wow, okay, so now that I have my arms wrapped around this thing, I realize that it's not really actually scary. I might need to more sort of dig in myself and maybe become more braver in some area. But I think the scariest things for us as humans is the not knowing. And so once we know, it becomes, I used to live in Southern California, and so earthquakes would roll through, and I don't know if you've ever been through an earthquake, Jess, but they are they're violent. They
not like California earthquakes, but yes, I have.
Right. California earthquakes, 7.5, and they're just really violent. The first thing you want to do is just check to see how big the earthquake was. Somehow just knowing what that was, it gives you some sense of calm, of presence, of sort of owning it. And that's, I think, the way it is a lot of times with our books.
Right. Well, and then what happens is when something happens and it shakes everything up, being able to look at something, say, yep, here we go. This is what we've got going on. Okay. Even though I can't do anything about the craziness that's going to ensue for the next hours or days, at least I know. Yes. And now, okay, so I've only been in one earthquake, and I've also been in a tornado, right? And they're very different because when tornadoes are coming, for the most part. You know that they're coming towards you. An earthquake, you don't know. So the day I'm sitting in my office and I thought a truck hit our building, I was like, what is this? What is going on? And then it took and then of course nothing worked for a while, and we were like, is everybody okay? What's going on? And that was I didn't even understand that there were numbers that assigned a size to an earthquake. Mm-hmm. And so thinking back to our books, what are some of the elements that allow us to have good practices to fall back on, that number, if you will? What are some elements that we should all be looking out for, and that maybe even if we are, to take a second look at?
Yeah, well, actually there's several of them. One of them is, we talked about the financial books as the story. And so that's really critical to keep that in mind. One of the things that's really interesting too, it makes, it's obvious once it's said, but, having more data, having the data of what we do, the history of what we do is critical, because going on the back end, we can see what we did, like on certain projects. So the one thing we can implement is timesheets.
Yeah.
And so what that does is that allows us to, and again, if it's done properly with the bookkeeper, making sure that each of the projects is separated, it allows us in the present time to see how well we did. And so that's great. How well we did with the project once it's closed out. And actually during the project, we can see what our budget was. So that's great. And that's fantastically helpful. The other critical piece of that is it allows us to, when we have a new project that's coming up, we can go back and look at that older project and look and see how we did things well, maybe how we didn't do things well, how we missed some things, how we could add some things. What that does is it allows your company to bid a job correctly.
This is one of the opportunities that we that I was alluding to, that we miss opportunities and we miss cost savings. So being able to understand how projects flow give us both just by having these timesheets.
Yes, exactly. And and a lot of times, I worked with a lot of professionals. Professionals, they can sort of push back on that, saying, I work a ton of hours. I don't want to do this. I'm a professional. But really, it's still, right? But
Sorry, I have to laugh out loud because anytime anybody says that they're anything, right? Oh, I'm the expert at this. I'm a professional. I'm that. We have a big blind spot. So we may have to come back to that. Keep going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. But and so I think for a company owner that has professionals, the story really is, the response back is, yes, that's without a doubt. And you're trusted. This is going to serve the company in a much greater fashion than not recording this. And so by you saying we're not interested, the pay is not an issue. It's how can we put these projects together so we know how much it's actually going to cost us. And I worked with this one company. It was a tech company. And and they did several different things, but one of the things that they did was they resold hardware. And they thought that they were making 20% profit because they were increasing the price by whatever it cost the company, but they weren't adding in how much time it took them to, say, load up a laptop. So at $125 an hour, it took them 5 hours, and they thought they were going to make $500, and so they were losing whatever that is, $750 on each transaction. So these things are just critical. And then just the second piece of that is with a bookkeeper, it's really important to balance the detail that we have to the level of effort and how much usefulness it's actually going to bring back out to us. We don't want to get so microscopically detailed in what we're recording that we're just taking up time and increasing the complexity of what we're trying to do.
All right. So now, and I think you know me well enough that we're going to skip what I was going to say next, and we're going to come back to blind spots. And the reason that these are important, right, is because when we know we have blind spots and we can accept that they exist, what it allows us to do is then rely on information that is not coming from our strengths. It's coming from the strengths of those that we bring together at the table. So when you're coming in and you're saying, Jess, do this with your business. Here's what you think you're doing, but here's the actual story. And I can go, that is so not what I thought. Maybe I was that tech company and we're losing $750 on every laptop we're putting together, right? Whatever the case may be, knowing means that we can change effectively. And so numbers are a very linear thinking. We did this, here's how it went down, this is the result, so now we can make a different decision. Well, coming back to the blind spot of me, that's good. I can linear think all day, but it's not any fun for me. So, and it's hard in the sense that it's a drain. It's hard for me to stay focused enough to think through that process. And I know I'm not alone here. And I know you work with people like me all the time, right? So how do we blend that linear thinking and the benefits that come from that to reduce our blind spots, for example, in just this one case where we might end up being a little, unfocused really isn't even the right word. It's more of a, well, I've already made the decision. We're going to do it anyway. You know what I mean? Have you run into those? linear thinking. Well, here we now have the data. It's different than around the decision, but the decision is going to happen anyway. Now what?
Right, right. And I think it's, first of all, it's interesting the initial thought that there can only be one story, or there can only be one telling of a story. I mean, if we look at history, two people could be sitting right next to each other and see the same event and describe it differently. They both could be 100% correct, but because of their biases, because of simply their viewpoint of where their eyeballs are, they could see things differently. So, so that first part of it, that this is our story, is typically not it's not the end all answer. Yes, it could be, and decisions have to be based on some understanding, but I think it's really critical. You talked about blind spot. It's critical that we also at least recognize that there are other stories, that there are other ways of looking at it. I see this all the time, that the world sort of wants us to believe that there are binary choices. It's either this or this.
Right.
And I typically reject that immediately, because it's typically not true. Even if it might be between those 2 points, or it could be something completely different. And you talk about the linear, nonlinear. In that instance, it's important that we get as many voices involved as possible, so that we can have a difference of opinion on what that story is. A lot of times, having men and women in the same room, they can see things differently. They can see what that diversity might look like, who else it might affect that somebody else may not be thinking about. So it's difficult. It's difficult to sit down and have one's point of view made maybe not the exact truth, but the payoff is that we can then see something different and make an even wiser decision about
Isn't that
how to go forward.
interesting? Because what I hear you saying is, yes, inclusion is important, diversity is important. And there's something that you talked around, and I'm going to punctuate it: question everything. And that comes back to where, even to when I started talking about blind spots, question everything, because we only know what we know. And when we only know what we know, provided we are willing and will show up to have an openness and an ability to see something else around us, that something else that might add insight to make the best decision possible for that period of time, is really important. And so that's a little bit of what I hear you saying. And that's where I really feel like financials come in, because, by the way, we've been in business, for 14 years over here at Red Direction. And I don't think I started using financials until like halfway through that time. I mean, but it's because I was like, oh, I don't need that. Oh, I know. I can just work off of whatever happens here and there. And the thing is, yeah, you can. And yes, I did. I succeeded in spite of myself. And I think that's the hardest part. Sometimes that sheer will, that story we think we're telling, we're going to wear it like armor to move forward and make decisions. Well, we can do that. And sometimes we're right. And sometimes we can totally make it work. When we've got 5, 10, 50, 100 people in our business working for us that now depend on coming to work every day because it's their livelihood for their families. And by the way, they probably like it because they're choosing to come to work with you every single day.
Right.
There's that, right? There's two sides of that. There's a responsibility there, that when we're talking about financials, when we're figuring out what that story is, and people looking at those numbers, like you said, 2 different ways, pretty amazing to have. And everybody's right. That's the thing. I have a 7-year-old. So you're either to blame or not to blame. You're right or you're wrong. And I'm like, well, kind of like you, linear thinking is out. We're also trying to instill that. And I see it so clearly. It's like, no, I think we're both right.
and it doesn't diminish either side.
Exactly.
That somebody else is right in their own way.
Yeah.
Part of it is, even if, let's say, my perspective is completely different from somebody else's.
Yeah.
If my perspective isn't taken into account during a product launch, at least it's known. So
Yes.
whatever it is that I brought up, now it's a known that we are not going to capture that population or whatever it is. But yeah, it's so critical to be open to new ways of seeing things.
And I'm going to go the other direction. I'm thinking about managing up for just a minute. So we may have the financials, we may have been given our growth goals, and decisions may be made thinking that the perspective that we're bringing to the table to somebody else higher than us looking for buy-in and we're not getting it. It's easy to feel resentment. It's easy to let our ego get in the way. We don't know unless we've asked, how come? How it doesn't look like this was included. Was it and I just missed it? And if it was not, it opens a dialogue. Well, here's actually more of the picture, and this is why we did what we did, or whatever the case may be. Being able to have that, I think those are hard conversations because we all have issues around money in some capacity. We really like it. We're good at making it. We have a fear of it. We have come from a scarcity mindset. I mean, there are all these things that each one of us shows up to the table with. And so when we're doing our role the best that we can and we're thinking about where we want to go, even if we're just thinking about how do we hit that goal because we want this for the company, we want to see the success and we want to be part of that success. When we're thinking like that, if we're not included or we don't feel like it, it's not up to anybody but us to ask, how come? What about? Give me more so that I can do my job better, because each one of us is on a path. We're where we are and we're where we want to go. And if we never will ask the question, we have no idea if we're actually building the skills or the ideas to get to where we want to go and how people are thinking about us. Isn't that an interest? Um, uh, it's actually a little bit of some sort of an internal report, some sort of a numbering system that we get to keep for ourselves here too, so that we can tell our own story. This is the journey we're on. And if it's not the path that we want to be on, we've got that gap that now we can close for our own personal development to achieve those goals and being able to functionally work within a financial structure and understand the financial side of the business as well as the role that we're playing, even if it's, outside of sales and marketing and decision making, right?
Right.
Strategy.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know that, one of the things that you do is you create, healthy organizations, that's your goal. And so, a lot of what we're talking about is helpful for helpful for a healthy organization. So, it's really I think the more somebody is open to the different stories, the better the outcome is going to be. And and the financials really, they tie into that a lot. It's the grease that, it lubricates the entire machine. And so, oftentimes the CEO and the CFO, they're typically the only ones really that kind of know everything that's going on in the organization. Different stories again, but they can be partners to flesh out what the larger story is, where maybe others in the organization couldn't in some instances because they don't have that insight. They're not seeing all of the all the parameters, all the boundaries, some of these other things. So but it really is a matter of just, okay, what is the healthiest way to go forward? Sometimes ego gets in the way of it, and that can be it can be a drag on the company financially, because it costs money sometimes to go a person's way instead of going the best way for the company. But that's the reality of it.
It is. And you brought up something so important. You didn't just say the CEO has the whole story. You said the CEO and the CFO. Maybe it's the CEO and the president. Who knows? But it's not a single person, because once we're operating in a vacuum, we have no sense of where our blind spots are anymore, do we? We have no sense that we're what we might accidentally be excluding or closed to. And so I want you to expand on that a little bit. Can you tell us a story about how something around that where we've got this, where it worked better because there were two people?
Well, that the story that I told before about that tech company, that really was one of them, where the company had been really quite successful for some time, And there wasn't, there's only a certain amount of time that an owner, a leader has to look at certain things. And
Right.
sometimes it can just be, I don't want to look at that. There was a construction company where it was a younger guy, late 20s, but he was making half a $500,000 in sales a year. Great numbers, wonderful. However, when I went in, he had $100,000 in accounts receivable on his books, some going back a year. And the initial conversation between he and I was, well, let's talk about this, whatever this was. And I said, this is what we should really be looking. First thing is that we should be looking at is getting this money in. And so it was one of those things where it was, I took that on and, got the money in. People, and just parenthetically, people actually love paying their bills when they're asked to. And this is a critical thing. If somebody takes this little nugget out, if a bill goes over 60 days, but certainly 90 days, and the client isn't asked to pay it, they will assume that you don't really want that money. And that invoice will go to the bottom of the pile until you ask. So it's critical to somebody's business process that they contact their clients as soon as possible to get that money in.
Interesting. That's also, So for all of you out there afraid of asking for money, now you know people actually want to be asked. Who knew? Pam has a question from our audience, #VBB Radio. Join in the conversation here. So Steve, here's a question for you. I've recently read an article about how rich people and successful people view money in a different way. At the same time, it's nonlinear and logical. But that was confusing because they're opposite. What's your thought about that?
Well, okay. So I think most people have a relationship with money that isn't really about money. And the thing about money is it's almost a stand-in, a proxy for so many of the things that we think we want. If there is massive abundance of money, it's always there, and it's not going to be taken as a resource that's going to go away. So when you have that, what your idea is then is I'm safe and I want to make more money. So, that idea of let's invest, let's get out there and talk to people about new products or whatever it might be. So that initial mindset is different from somebody that maybe even somebody that's successful and is making a lot of money, but they have that the sort of mindset of there's not enough. And whenever large amounts of money come in, then there's this sensibility of it's not going to be there in the future, so let's spend it because it's going to go away. So, the thing is, it is really what part of me, the part inside of us that wants things, that wants to feel safe, that wants to feel loved. And this is as individuals. How do we want, what do I actually need? And what is this thing that I'm going to purchase going to get for me? But it's really, it's the mindset. If there's a sense of abundance, then the attitude about it is going to be different. And I like to always, there's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. And one of the takeaways from that is how much do you need, is the question. And if the spending is a little bit more than what you're bringing in, the actual response is, I don't actually need that much. I could throttle back just a little bit so that I could make all the other things even better for myself. So our relationship to money is our own kind of personal story, but there's a lot of things that we hold in common, between us.
Thank you. All right, we're going to jump to a break. We'll be back right after this.
You're listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. Stay current and receive programs to continue sparking ideas about growth strategy by subscribing to the program at voiceofboldbusiness.com. Now, back to Jess.
financials to set direction for growth. I'm talking with Steve Merager. See, look at, I did it again. Steve Merager, haha.
Yep. Thank you.
A fractional CFO and financial storyteller who achieves your growth strategy by bringing in this very important element of business. And okay, so now, I'm going to share a story, and you may or may not be ready for this. So when we're talking about money, it's kind of like looking in somebody's underwear drawer, right? And that's something you and I share in common, Steve. We are up in people's business more than they would like, and there has to be this understanding, and I say has to because somebody must be open and willing to let us in and see how many pairs of underwear have holes in them. Well, and the only way that can happen is through working together. And you and I actually, we broke boards together, didn't we?
We did.
I have mine right behind this curtain in my bookshelf. And so what we did was we were in a program and we were doing this exercise where we were looking at something that was limiting us. And when we were looking at this that was limiting us, we wrote it on one side of the board. And then on the other side of the board, we wrote what we were going to break through to, what was on the other side of that belief that was holding us back. And then we get up and we each took a turn and we said it out loud and we broke a board. Now, when we did that, it was really awkward the first time I have ever done anything like that. I didn't know anybody in the room. So I was like, courageous, that's fine. As soon as there were people in the room that I knew, like you, Steve, I got extra nervous. And because I was like, oh, this person actually knows me. They're going to learn something else about me. And do I even want Steve to know this about me? And, in the grand scheme of things, it made it a stronger exercise because the answer is absolute. Once I got done, I was like, the answer was absolutely yes. Somebody that I can be totally truthful for. I can let down my guard. I can make sure that there's somebody that I'm talking to that allows me to just state it like it is without anybody worrying about how it affects their job, about how it affects this, how it affects that. What does that mean for what's happening next? The things that are already in motion, because we all work from those places. And so that's one of the things that I enjoy about the work that you do, Steve, and the work that I do is that we get to be that somebody that's sometimes outside of the organization because we may not have anybody to talk to within the organization. And even if we have a CEO and a CFO, there's only so much you can really hear and talk to about each other without overloading each other and wanting to support and share. So there's this line of responsibility that I'm thinking of, and I know it's going to come. There's this responsibility of I need to tell as much as I can, and I need to tell only as much as the other person can handle. Mm-hmm. How does that fit into the work that you do and working and reading financial stories to create the best path to achieve the strategy?
Yeah, so you're alluding to it, but there's often one of the first barriers to somebody opening up to work such as what I do and what you do is a sense of shame. And it's really sort of interesting because I've had people come to me and they say, well, I'm a financial planner, but my business isn't doing whatever it is. And the thing is that I think of it as a story. I think of it as an opportunity. I think of it as a human condition that is, it is what we are where we are. And let's just sort of solve the problem. So that first piece, really is just realizing that we're human and that we have our own story and nobody's story is going to be ever like our own. And so and also the thing is that most people don't start their business wanting to do their financials. In fact, people hate doing financials. It's just, they look at it and it's like they're going to get a tooth extracted or something.
Well, and if they're really lucky, they have a partner that likes that when they get started. I mean, you know what I mean? And that's very rare also.
It is. And, it's a matter of, what do you want to see? That's the thing. And so part of what I do too is my sense of ethics and holding everything that's told to me in absolute confidence is one of my personal core values. And so anything anybody tells me, I don't even tell people who my clients are. I don't even say the name of the clients, unless I've specifically asked. So it's only ever going to be between us, and it's going to be whatever the story is. And
Can I jump in and say,
yeah,
and that's all it is. It's a story. And it's like the never ending story that you get to choose your own ending just by the actions that you take.
I love that.
Isn't that great?
Go ahead.
That's my little luck dragon. That's Falcor. It just kind of fit here. So I was like, hey, look, Falcor gets to make an appearance. So anyway, but yes, we get to choose and that's the part that I think we forget. We're telling ourselves a story. We feel like we're resigned to this path, and we're really not. Right. We can, and actually, like that board breaking, it's like, oh, look, I get to do something new. And oh, look, somebody who I know witnessed this too. And now what? Right. Now they're going to know more about me and maybe be able to relate to me better if I get crazy or if I get really cool or whatever, whatever the two sides of the coin might be. And I think that's an interesting concept, and that's to be able to work with somebody like you, Steve, in the sense of, hey, we've got to be able to see all sides. And when we're honest, and confidentiality, I love that you brought up confidentiality. I'm similar. I don't mind telling people who I'm working with, provided the clients are okay with that. And I don't mind, sharing stories of clients that I worked with a decade ago, because we're not necessarily working together now. But I also know that, I've had a client who, I had a client who was talking to somebody else, and that somebody else was talking to me, and me and this other person, we were having this conversation, and this client of mine was like, I had no idea you guys were talking to each other about this. He's the one who spilled the beans. And I said, well, then let him be the one that spilled the beans, because it's not my place to tell you anything. I mean, you know what I mean? My place is to hold the space of trust, as is yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Integrity is key to everything in my mind. And, it's, I think everything, I think it's also just good business. I would do this anyway, even if it wasn't good business. But our stories are how we hold space, how we are good for the people that we're attempting to serve, will follow us for probably all the days of our lives. And it doesn't take much to break trust. It only takes really one thing. We all know that.
That's true. It does not take very much at all. Okay, so let's talk about negatively impacting growth. Have you ever experienced something where I'm just going to name it. How many times have too many cooks been in the kitchen? So the purpose, the goals, the growth strategy gets diluted because there's zero ability or low ability to get everybody's ideas flowing in the same direction.
Yeah, that's sort of a dynamic that's interesting. To be collegial and thoughtful and respectful of others, but at the same time having a decision. And somebody at some point just says, whoever that leader is, just says, this is it. This is where we're going, because we can't wait any longer.
Somebody has to say it.
Somebody does. Yeah, exactly.
Somebody has to say that. And that's actually something that I see a lot of CEOs fail at. Presidents, any, chief operating officers, maybe even sometimes a CFO, it doesn't matter. Somebody has to step up and hold that vision. And everybody looks to the CEO to do that. Yet, depending on what the beliefs are of that person in that position, that's actually the first thing. We tend to limit our own growth, is what I would say, our company's growth. We as the leaders. Exactly.
And, as I said, I was employed by a university, and it's where collegial comes from, right? From college. And it's so everybody on the far end comes out, and they know that they've been heard. But, I went into, it was a public university, and there was this thing that needed to be implemented. I told them we can do it in 3 months, and they said it's going to take a minimum of a year to implement. It took like 3.5 months, and but it was something that was really needed. And it was just something that I pushed through. Whole idea of keeping of what's the priority. If somebody doesn't make it such that, yes, this is every day, this is a priority, it doesn't get done. And so, yeah, that there has to be a leader, even at the most collegial environments. Somebody should, in a healthy environment, somebody should stand up and say, okay, so let's form this. What is going to be the endpoint? What is success? And now we're at success, or even 95% of success, which is fine sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, as
absolutely,
as a phase.
It's still a win. That's interesting. It makes me think of managing up, right? So here we are in this role. We are somewhere in the middle of the organization, and we're trying to do something that's different than the existing dynamic that's already there. And we know it's a priority. It's been deemed a priority, yet the ability to get it done is still kind of this weird wishy-washy space. Well, I have been in a situation, and I will not name the company that this is, where there was a need to manage up, and the role and the need, the leader would not make a decision outside of what the leader knew. And the leader knew what they knew, and that was it. And so everything outside of that, it was like this free for all, cat fight, keeping all the the lobsters in the bin, whatever it was. It was horrible. And finally, I actually just had to say, I said, look, you have to tell us what you want, because we all know what's needed, and we're going about it a whole bunch of different directions. Give us a direction that we can all go in together, because I have failed and failed and failed, and I'm starting to get burnt out, banging my head against this wall of trying to get this done. Yes. Give us a direction. And it allowed a different conversation to be had, apparently with closed doors, and some of the other people who were part of this not wanting to move forward in a particular direction because it wasn't theirs. So we had a lot of ego problems around this particular project. And he finally said it. And when he finally said it, it was like, okay, here we go. And everybody, it still wasn't easy, but we at least got the thing done. But being able to have that conversation, wow, there's this thing here. How much of a priority is this really? Because I could be making way more impact over here if this is not the priority.
Right. And right. Yeah, exactly. And so that's, the interesting to determine what those priorities are. Yes. Because anything could be done. And, scope of work can be expanded indefinitely, and there will never be success. And all the people that are trying to work on that project are just going to be frustrated. Yep. And so it simply doesn't work. So that's why, like with a budget, there's a specific outcome that we need to get to. We need to go out a year, and, we're going to look at it every month, and it's going to be a living document. And so when that happens, we get to a point of, okay, so this is success right now. And now every month going forward, we're going to meet, and we're going to redefine what that success is, or what it is that we need to do. And so when that's really clear, they may grout, gripe about it. But at least what the end point is. It kind of goes back to what you were saying before about the unknowns. Once people know what success looks like, yes, they're far more willing to buy in, because, okay, I get it. I need to work, and this is going to be success. So and especially if you can get the entire organization to go in the same direction, then it's success by the entire organization, which is so much more powerful than for most people than individual success.
All right. We've been using, through this entire conversation, financials as an internal look, an internal assessment, an internal evaluation, to spring from how the company is doing to how we might have limiting beliefs, where we are losing money, where there's opportunity, right? All of this internal. Well, what if we flipped it around? And we were using our financials to better understand the competitive marketplace around us. Is there such a thing, and how would we do that?
Well, there's standard reports about how how other organizations are doing in one's own competitive market. What the how much money they're bringing in. So there is reporting. It can be limited with private companies, but a lot of the times it is who is in the marketplace, who's affecting this, who's taking customers. If there's physical locations, if it's virtual, it can be how is the company set up to be visible on the web, on a Google search. So and so that's how a lot of that, how we gauge a lot of that competitiveness. And so we want to be out there and we want to do all the things so that anybody that's searching for us, they find us as quickly as possible instead of our competition.
Isn't that interesting? I was thinking, well, and even with private companies, you know who the top players are, even if you don't know their exact numbers, right? And you know what makes them the top players, whether it's price, whether it's service, whether, whatever type of business, how diverse they are, where they have penetrated markets, where they have their verticals, things like that. So even in a private company, we can glean a little bit, even though we might not know the numbers, but we could take our numbers and where our things are in those related buckets and be able to compare. So if we wanted to increase our market share, we could go, okay, well, this is what our bucket of market share looks like inside, right? In terms of here's what our customers are, here are the products that they're buying, here's here are some, whatever those aspects are that you were listing out earlier, and then be able to go, so how is this person or this company doing it differently than us?
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that.
But it's fuzzy.
Yeah. And there's also hard research that can be done. There's an organization, it's called Reference USA, and you can it's hundreds of columns of information on your competition, different areas of business. So yeah, there are a lot of resources out there. Some have to be paid, but those are critical items.
Okay, so hashtag VBB Radio. Gary has asked a question. Are you ready for this one, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, what are the most common financial blind spots that executives have in your experience?
Really not knowing what's going on in their company to a great degree. There's not enough granularity of what's going on. And again, that kind of gets back to the timesheets as one of them, but they're not being given reports about how each division is doing. They're not meeting regularly to make sure that what the expectations are what's actually happening and making adjustments. So it really is not looking at the reports and not having a bookkeeper or hopefully a CFO that can give them reports to answer specifically the questions that they're asking, so that all of the things that they're doing strategically can come together, and having the story that most supports what they are trying to do with the company.
Okay, what makes it bold? What makes it bold to use past performance and figure out leaps to new levels of growth?
Well, I mean, it's just it's taking the time. It's understanding that it's our own business and nothing is more important. It's the solid gold of our companies, of what our history is. And it really is taking the time and the resources so that we can see what that, what that is. It's a leaning forward. I know what we need to do. I know what we want to do. What have we done? What can we do? And it can be difficult. And whenever anything's difficult, that's, I think, by definition, bold.
You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen, stopping by, listening later. This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio with our special guest, Steve Merager. And I have to tell you, I've enjoyed this conversation. I wish the time didn't fly by so fast. You're going to find all the program notes for this show, number 180, at voiceofboldbusiness.com. And the exact URL you can go to is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P180. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 180. You may also search the site, use financials to set direction for growth. Okay, now it's your turn. You've heard Steve share a lot of stories, a lot of information. You've heard me add to the story just a little bit. Now it's your turn. How are you going to keep this conversation and use this in your business today, tomorrow, the next day? And we want to know what you think. What are your experiences? Do you have similar experiences to Steve as he's been sharing? Do you have different experiences? Because it's your experiences, Steve's experiences, my experiences that we get to learn from each other, that we get to keep ourselves expanding without having to have experiences all on our own, because that is the definition of somebody who can think ahead, plan ahead, have strategic growth plans that will actually get done, because we must be able to use information without having personal experience with it, to use it well, learning from others around us. So tell us, how will you practically use the information shared today? Now, we also want to know, and we're going to end with this, what can you do to leverage the story of your financials to set a direction for growth?
The Voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. Use hashtag VBBRadio or email us at radio@reddirection.com to ask questions and share your experiences. Add your voice to the conversation. Together, we define what being an effective leader means today. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.